Hello, my dear students of class 11. I welcome you again to our psychology class. And in this class, we will be discussing on our new unit, that is on unit 7, that will be emotion. Now, this particular topic we'll be discussing on what are the derivation of the word emotion. At the same time, we will be discussing what is emotion, and then there are some few topics that will be, discussed in this class. So before we go into the further topics of what emotions are or what are the techniques to manage negative emotions, I would like to give a few introduction on what is emotion. Before I go to what is emotion, I want to tell a few intro on derivation of the word emotion. The word emotion is derived from the Latin word, which in Latin word it is derived from the word of emovere. The spelling will be E-M-O-V-E-R-E. So emovere is a Latin word. The meaning of emovere is basically to stir up. So emotion is basically stirring up of our psychological feelings, which can be in terms of anger, or it can be in terms of happiness, sadness, and then there are some, so these are the basic emotions that an individual go through in our day-to-day lives. Now, what is emotion? In psychological terms, emotion is a complex pattern of change in response to situation perceived as personally significant, which includes psychological arousals or feelings, thoughts, and behavior. Now, by this meaning, it means that emotion is a complex pattern, like it is a complex pattern in response to situations. So if sometimes for an example, day-to-day lives, whenever we get scolding from our seniors or example from our teachers, then there is a psychological arousal because you are reacting to the situation that you are facing. So emotions can involve, sometimes you might get sad, or sometimes you might take the situation in a very, very aggressive way, so which will come in terms of anger. So emotion is basically responding to the situation as personally significant to yourself. So it can involve psychological arousals of feelings, that is sad, anger, or happy. And thoughts is basically like having thoughts of, I did not like what he said, or I did not like what my parents told me to do. So these are the thoughts. And behavior is basically sometimes behaviors, you exhibit behaviors in terms of actions. Whenever you get angry, sometimes people, in aggression, people basically hit other people also. And at the same time, they do self-infliction of wounds. They cut themselves up. So these are the kinds of aggression that they exhibit when they get angry. So that comes under the perspective of emotion. Now, the next topic that I'll be discussing is on how to manage your emotions, how to manage the emotions. And managing emotions is a difficult task in our day-to-day lives, but it is also very important to have a balanced life. In order to have a balanced life, we need to manage our emotions. For an example, if you wake up early in the morning and if you get a scolding from your parents for something that you did not do the last night or the last evening, then sometimes our emotions, the exhibitions of our emotions can be in terms of anger. So when you get angry with your parents, then the morning or the 3 hours of your morning gets distracted because you are not able to focus on your on your personal lives, or sometimes you are not able to focus on your work. So that distractions of your emotions can cause imbalance or improper way of handling your personal life. So that becomes a problem for your personal life in order to carry on. So basically, managing emotions is very, very important for any individual to have a proper and balanced life. So basic emotions. When we discuss the basic emotions that we go through in our day-to-day life, and it is in terms of scientifically proven, is basically the first one is anger. And anger is one of the negative emotions that we will be discussing in our next topic. But the basic emotions involves disgust, happiness. Happiness is basically when you are happy. If you are happy with something, if you are happy of sometimes when your parents buy you something or buy you new clothes, then you feel happy. So that is also a continuous, or it does not change. It becomes a constant form of emotions that we experience. And happiness, sadness. Sadness is basically loss of something. If you have lost one of your friend, a dear one, in terms of death, then you experience sadness. And then disgust is basically jealousy. If you are not happy with someone and if you are jealous, so that's the kind of emotions that we go through in our day-to-day lives, and that will come under basic emotions. Now, I want to discuss on the next topic of anger. Now, anger, when it comes to anger, anger is basically considered to be a negative emotions because anger can hamper your life and it can also disrupt your day-to-day life because it can create an imbalanced way of living life. So anger is basically a negative emotion. The meaning of anger in psychological term is that it carries mind away and results in loss of control on behavioral functions during the stage of anger. So what does it basically means that it carries away, like it carries your perception of something. For an example, if you are angry at your friend, then your relationship with the friend gets distracted, or it gets especially it gets restrained or strengthened. So it puts you in a very difficult position to control the relationship or to have a very happy relationship with that friend. So basically, anger is basically carrying your mind away and resulting in loss of control on behavioral functions. Many of the studies have shown that when it comes to anger, if you are angry with a spouse, or for an example, when a person is angry with his wife, then it results on behavioral functions like hitting the wife and in sometimes showing aggressive behavior. And it has been reported that when we are angry and when we are out of our control, that is basically anger and not able to handle our emotion, that aggression, then basically an individual turns up to violent behavior. And violent behavior has been seen in many of the societies, including in our society, where, for an example, if a husband is angry with his wife, then the husband basically beat the wife, and sometimes it can cause to severe problems for the person who has been experienced that violent behavior from the particular person. So it results in assault, and sometimes anger can also lead to maladaptive behavior of sexual assault as well on individuals. Now, anger is basically a loss of control on our behavioral functions. So it's very important to manage anger. So I will be discussing on the next topic of how to manage our negative emotions. Now, based on the topic of anger, I want to explain in this class about the techniques of how to manage our negative emotions. Now, when it comes to managing our negative emotions, the first technique that we have to use is that enhanced self-awareness. Enhanced self-awareness is basically means that you have to be aware of your actions. You have to be aware of your emotions. If you are aware of your emotions, you get an idea of how to handle. So basically, if you are angry at someone, then you have to be aware that yes, I am angry with that particular friend or with that particular individual. Then how are you going to handle that particular situation? Is basically you can talk with that person. If you are angry with him, then you can go up to that friend and then you can tell that, yes, I was unhappy because of what you did the last day or what you did the last month. Then you can interact with that person and you can sort out the problem. So basically it comes under enhancing self-awareness, knowing who you are and knowing what your emotions are and knowing what you are going through. So enhancing self-awareness is the one technique that you can follow in order to manage negative emotions. The second one will be appraise the situation objectively. Appraise the situation objectively. It means that you, not in a subjective terms, but you have to appraise, like you have to know the situation in a very objective manner. For an example, many of the students go through exams, and sometimes they think that they are working hard, but at the same time, the time and efforts that they have put in getting good marks may not be as expected to their expectations. So sometimes they get sad. So one of the techniques of managing how to manage that sadness is basically appraise the situation objectively. You will have to see, why am I getting these low marks? What happened or what actually happened? Then when you take the situation in a very objective manner, and when you look through it in a very objective outlook, then you will see that you might have missed out some questions that you thought were not important, and that questions might have come in the exam. So that becomes a failure on your part of not studying those questions. And sometimes it can so happen that the time and effort that you have put, like for an example, you have put 12 hours in studying a particular subject, but at the same time, why you are not getting the good marks that you were expecting is basically because you have not put 48 hours into that particular subject of studying. So that can happen. That can happen for you to getting the low marks. So appraise the situation objectively. When you appraise the situation objectively, you get an idea of what went wrong, and then you get an idea of how to handle yourself or how to handle your situations, your emotions as well. The third one is do some self-monitoring. Do some self-monitoring is a very, very important technique of how to handle your negative emotions. Self-monitoring is basically day-to-day life. When you come home and then you can sit back for at least 5 minutes and you can think that, okay, what have I done today in order to maintain your emotional level at an average point. So you can monitor your behavior, your self-monitoring. Like for an example, in a class, if you have said inappropriate things to your friends, then you can talk to yourself that, yes, I'm not going to do that from next day. And if you have thought that you have done good things, for an example, you met someone happy or your friend happy by sharing your tiffin or by sharing your books, then you can say that, oh yes, this is a good behavior that I need to do very often. So that comes under the self-monitoring of your emotions. That's how once you do those self-monitoring of your behaviors and making it and doing the positive behaviors in a very, very good outlook, then you can manage your negative emotions. The fourth one is perceptual reorganization and cognitive restructuring. Perceptual reorganization and cognitive restructuring is basically perceiving at the things in a very different way. If you are perceiving something in a very negative way, then you will have to think that, yes, okay, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to restructure it. I'm going to make it into a very positive emotion, and I'm not going to follow the negative emotions that I was following. So basically, you will have to perceive the situation, and then you will have to make changes in your cognitive restructuring. Cognitive restructuring is basically your mindset, your mentality. That comes under cognitive restructuring. The fifth one is develop and nurture good relationship. It is also one of the very important technique that helps in managing negative emotions. Is basically, if you have good friends, then you are going to have good relationship, and good relationship means that you will have good emotions like happiness. And then you will have empathy. Empathy is basically putting yourself in someone else's shoes and looking at their situation. So basically, developing good relationship is very important to handle negative emotions. The sixth one that I was discussing is have empathy. Have empathy is different from sympathy. Sympathy is basically like, I feel sorry for that person, but empathy is basically you are putting yourself in someone else's shoes, and then you are experiencing their situation. And when you have empathy, you have a better idea of what that person is going through. So likewise, sympathy is feeling sorry, but empathy is basically putting yourself in their shoes. So these are the topics that we'll be discussing in this class. Thank you.